Hi guys, it's Sarah Taylor. Hi, I just was getting ready to mix up some paints for a small cloud pour. And I thought I would just kind of walk you through mixing some paint since I've had some questions, and maybe this can help kind of clear up confusion, and it just would be fun to show you a little bit of my process. So I'll show you what I'm working with today, and we're just gonna, unfortunately a painting got lost. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So Artist Loft Flow acrylic white, flotrol, GAC 800. This is just a Behr brand, which is a Home Depot brand. It's a Behr brand ultra white satin enamel paint. And I just move them into these bottles for easier access. And this was Liquatex pouring medium. And let me show you the big ones real quick so you know what products they are. Okay, so this is the golden GAC 800. This is great stuff. And I'll talk more about these as we're mixing our paint, and this is the Liquatex pouring medium. So they also do a varnish, and you want to make sure to get, this is the one I like. This is the good stuff for me, Liquatex gloss pouring medium. All right, I'm going to bring you down to my workstation and we'll mix up some base coat and then also a color for the cloud over pearl pour. All right, see you in a second. There we go. I hope that's good. Okay, so I don't measure, you guys. Some people do. For me, mixing paint should be sort of a joyful thing. I'm gonna turn my heater down so it's not so loud. Hold on one second. So for me, mixing paint, is, it's something that you kind of get a feel for. You get to know and understand the products that you're working with, and that's what makes it successful. So this is I want to say an 18-ounce cup. Let's work with a 12-ounce cup instead, just to be. See, this is why I'm not the teacher award person for paint pouring. I'm more like the process, but I think this could be good. So I'm gonna do 1 part paint, about like that. And this does not have to be precise. That's the beautiful thing about acrylic pouring, is it's not a precision. Some formats maybe need to be more precise. This is a fairly forgiving recipe. It's much more about consistency than recipe. So paint, that's the Flow White paint, and then this is the Flood Flotrol. And what I do is I take a large bottle of this and I strain it into my small bottle. So I just have it handy and I know it doesn't have any chunks in it. And tip, the flotrol with the white cap is better than the flotrol with the orange cap. The orange cap stuff seems to be the stuff that's getting like rotten. And then we're gonna go over to the Behr white satin enamel. Behr is a Home Depot brand, if you're not familiar with it. I think any white satin enamel would work. And a lot of my recipes say half part satin enamel. I've probably been doing closer to a full part. So like another part satin enamel. I like to wipe my, so they don't get gunky. And I'm doing a painting like this because, I'm doing a small batch because a painting that I shipped to somebody got lost in the mail, and it was really sad. Calabasas got lost. So anyways, I'm gonna make him something hopefully even better. This is GAC 800. And I just put a nice squirt of it in there. I think my recipe says a quarter part, which is approximate. The GAC 800 I think is a little bit more important in the base coat than the Liquatex pouring medium. And Liquatex and pouring medium, I'm gonna do the same thing. Nice little squirt. It doesn't take a whole lot of this stuff. This stuff is pretty, if you've ever gotten it on your hands, you'll know how sort of potent it is. It like is impossible to get off your hands. Heavy duty binder. So when you're watering paint down, acrylic paints have a binding property in them that help them bind the pigments together. It helps them bind them to the canvas. And if you're watering it down this much, you're gonna need something in it that's gonna help it to bind together. And that's where these wonderful products come in. The effect itself is really coming from the satin enamel and the water. The white paint is to add pigment because you could do all satin enamel instead of using this. You could use pretty much any white acrylic paint. You could even pigment it with something like this, which is expensive, but you could use this to add some white pigment to it. And it's basically kind of offsetting the flotrol, in my opinion. Like, flotrol doesn't have pigment. It's not a binding element. Really what flotrol is, in my mind, is a conditioner, a paint conditioner. It makes it smooth, it makes it more runny, it gives it, this stuff is more about the consistency. So, 12-ounce cup. You know what? I'm gonna need more room than that for water, believe it or not. So I'm gonna just go ahead and move this into a 18-ounce cup, which is probably what I should have started with to begin with. And I did inadvertently measure the amount of water I put into this recipe one time. I think it was about 40%. But sometimes your flotrol is thicker. Sometimes it's thinner. Sometimes the Artist Loft Flow White is goopy and thick, and sometimes it's watery. So it's not always exact. It's something that you have to play with and experiment with on your own to really learn. I've followed exact recipes from other artists and gotten completely different results. Why? It's a question that I've asked the universe. I wish I knew the answer. This is just water. So our 18-ounce cup, we're up to about right here with product. And be pretty generous here with water. What we're looking for is watery, but also creamy. It's interesting how something can be watery and creamy at the same time, but it does happen. And that looks pretty thin. I'm gonna try to turn one more light on and see if it gives the... That's probably better, huh? So, and I would say, oh, this is good. Is it leaving a little bit of a trace? It's kind of, when it drops in, it's leaving like a vortex, a tiny little vortex, and then flattening out. I think it needs to go even a little bit thinner. And instead of pouring at this point, I like to use a pipette because you can overdo it really easily. And if this gets too thin, your painting's gonna sort of fall apart. And if it's not thin enough, then the effects just don't really work. Okay, that looks pretty good. And I'm gonna mix a paint color too. So, I'm trying to remember what was in Calabasas. There was a really pretty violet color. So this is Deep Violet by Liquatex Basics. A lot of times I sort of start with a heavier bodied paint like this, something a little bit less expensive. And some people don't agree with mixing like golden fluids into a heavier bodied paint, like it's a waste, but for me, it's not, because I think what makes a painting really special is the color palette. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of that. And going for kind of a plum color. So I'm gonna go for a little bit of my Algerian crimson. This is just a Grumbacher Academy color. Just kind of a nice red, kind of a medium bodied paint. You don't, this is for the, this is, okay, so the cloud over is, I mix by cloud over paints just about the same way, and I'll probably do a different video on the cloud over paint, or I could just show you what it looks like, and I'll talk you through it a little bit. So I don't need a whole lot because this is just kind of going to be for one painting. I'm sure it'll run over into other paintings as well. And I almost added blue, but I don't want it to go purple, like way too purple, so that actually looks pretty good. From here, I add just a tiny bit of flotrol, my conditioner, and it does help stretch your pigment. It helps stretch your paint so it goes farther. I used to use a lot more flotrol than I use now, and when I first started following Melly D and doing puddle pours, I didn't use any flotrol for a while, and it was a really, really good lesson, because when I took all the flotrol out of my paint, I learned so much about the paint itself and what paints do, what different brands of paint do. Like Deco Art paint, for some reason, without any satin enamels or anything, Deco Art paint, for some reason, reacts really strongly in a puddle pour. And when I say puddle pour, we're talking, you know, the original concept of puddle pour is some people use, like Paul Stardart used to call it high flow. And we're talking thin paint. And all those guys used like GAC 800. So I just put a little squirt of GAC 800 in there. They didn't all use GAC 800. A lot of people used just this Liquatex pouring medium. So, you know, I put all three of those elements into this paint. A little bit of flotrol, GAC 800, Liquatex pouring medium. It's starting to look a little bit dull, which for me says there's a little bit too much pouring medium in here and not quite enough pigment. The paint is the pigment, and heavier medium body paints come with the binding properties. And actually, so do fluid acrylics, have strong binding property in it. It's very liquid, but it's a strong binder as well. So, it's a little too purple. And this is why my paints run over from one painting to the next, which is wonderful. You know, you don't want to have to sit down and mix a bunch of paint every time. This does need a little bit of blue in it. So I like this stuff, Deco Art Media. It's kind of like golden fluid acrylics, but it's, I kind of want to use it up before I go back to my fluid acrylics. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of blue in there. Oh. Now it's purple. That's okay. Red. I'm going for a really pretty plum, rich plum color. We're getting there, that's pretty. And a lot of times, this is what I do in the studio. I wish every day was a painting day, but a lot of the time it's mixing and playing with paint in preparation for a pour. So I've got some other stuff mixed up here. Okay, so let's finish this one while we're talking about it. I've got my Liquatex pouring medium, I've got my GAC 800, I've got my pigment, my paint in there. I'm liking the color. Some paints can take more pouring medium than others, like the higher the pigment, the more pouring medium you can add. And then we just water it down to consistency, and we want it to be a similar consistency as the base coat. So all the colors, other than the gray and the white cloud over mix, all of my colors I mix this way for this type of pour. Still pretty goopy. I put quite a bit of pigment in there, especially with that media paint. I'm gonna add just a little bit more flotrol. Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of find that flotrol has its place in fluid art. At least for me it does. It's widely used because it's accessible and it's affordable. But I don't use it the way I used to, like I was saying, because these other pouring mediums have such good qualities to them that I find it important to use them as well. This is getting about right. It's getting pretty watery. And I'm trying to kind of match it to this consistency. And this is actually even still a little bit too thick. Once you figure this out, and a lot of times you're seeing a tinted base coat. So a lot of times my tinted base coat is coming from paint that I take off the plastic from a painting. And then, because luckily the beautiful thing about this is all these paints have the same ingredients in them. Like there's not some weird ingredient in the paint that isn't in the base coat. Like there's no oils in this style painting. There's no, you know, polyurethane. There's nothing like that. So when you do a painting, you can scrape the paint off the plastic and likely add a little bit more satin enamel to it and use it as a base coat, which is what I do. And sometimes if it's too blue, I'll like add a little bit of like Indian yellow hue to get more of a beige tone. If it's too beige and I want more of a gray, I'll add some black to it. So this is kind of that. This was from Enlighten. This was the base coat that I used for that painting. And the only real metallics I use, hardly any of it comes off the canvas, so the metallics kind of stay out of that leftover paint, which is good. And even if there is a little bit of metallic in it, it's all good. I mean, I'm kind of like, roll with it. Try not to waste paint. I'm gonna give you a little lecture, guys. Try to use glass vessels. You know, These puppy pads I do like. I use them and use them and use them until they're really toast. I got a fresh one out for this video just for the sake of having a clean workspace. But, and you don't want to put any acrylics down the drain. So what I do when I'm washing my vessels out is I take an old bottle of flotrol and I have it in the sink next to me. And I rinse all the bottles out, all the vessels, and then pour the concentrated water that's concentrated with all the leftover paint into the flotrol bottle. And I take them to the dump and dispose of them properly. A little bit can go down the drain, washing your tools and stuff. So this is the Charvin. I love this paint, it's so pretty. It's Charvin is the brand, Indigo's the color. I talk about it a lot, Charvin Indigo, Charvin Indigo. And then I add usually to this a little bit of Payne's Gray, a couple drops. Golden Fluids is so cool because you can really change the color of your paint with just a little bit of it, and then a little bit of Jenkins green. And it just makes this really, really pretty color. So I'm gonna use that. And that one's pretty much ready to go. So, you know, you're looking for all these to be the same consistency. Runny, you want them runny. This paint, I did the same thing. I added a little bit of flotrol, GAC 800, Liquatex pouring medium, and water. It's magic. If you didn't use these two, it might look good right out of the gate, but it's not gonna dry well. It's gonna kind of fall apart. It just won't work out as well, so. Yeah, that's a pretty good little rundown of the base coat and the colors. So some of the other colors I like to use that I have right here, I can show you real quick, is the Modern Masters. This is their iridescent gold. I took most of my puddle paints and I changed them for a different style pour I'm doing. So I'm kind of trying to rebuild some paints right now. I thought I would let you join in. All right, I hope this was helpful and I hope you have a beautiful day. Okay, we'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.